Hello and welcome to the podcast Love, Life and Loss. Today we have the fabulous Marge joining us. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Would you like to
My
introduce
pleasure.
yourself for everybody?
Yes, so my name is Mars Lord. Mars like the planet, not the chocolate, because I'm not that sweet, despite what people think and say. Um, I am a doula educator, a birth activist, a life coach, oh, and a legacy achievement in Black Maternal Health award winner. So that's me. Oh, if you want more personal details, I'm a mother to five biologically, and however many that have I've gathered over the years. And I am nonna, which is Italian for grandmother, to two and one non-biological.
Oh, that's
So
lovely.
that's me.
And so, thank you so much. I mean, you do so much. You've done so much, and I can't wait to hear your story. So, would you like to tell us your story from the start, however that looks to you?
Gosh, when I think about this journey of mine that started with doulaing, so it started with tea and cake, actually. So my twins were newborn, tiny babies, and I wanted to not hold them for an hour. So, because when you have twins, you're constantly holding babies. And one of the mums at school was having a coffee morning. I do not like school coffee mornings. However, I knew that when I arrived, they'd take the twins and my hands would be free for an hour. I'm amazed I got through the door. They scooped the twins up, and I'm not sure they remembered I was at the front door. So I went in, and whilst I was there, the woman hosting the coffee morning began talking about being a doula, how she trained to be a doula. And that piqued my interest because I'd never heard the word before. And she talked about how she was trained to support people in birth, not doing anything medical or clinical, but being an emotional, physical, spiritual support. And I thought, oh, I've done that because I supported my sister when she had my niece. In fact, I supported my niece when she had her sons. Um, and I'd supported a friend who wanted me to go to the birth to make her laugh. Though in the middle of the birth, she kept shouting at me and her husband to not laugh, even when we weren't laughing, which made us want to laugh. And so it was about swallowing that down and just respecting her space and what she wanted. So that was my journey into doulaing. I trained with Michel Audant, who's a famous French obstetrician, and Liliana Lamas, who is an incredible doula. And I sat in this room full of people, and I'll never forget they were all introducing themselves. Hi, I'm Jane, I've one child. Hi, I'm Patricia, I've got three children. Hi, I'm Kate, I've got one child. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when it gets to me? And then this woman said, hi, I'm Sue. I've got eight children. And I was like, yes. So when it came round to me, I said, hi, I'm Mars. I've just got five. And I remember going home from this course, having learnt about the physiology of birth, the hormones of birth, and thinking, wow, I wish I had a chance to give birth that way. And I was like, oh, I should have another baby. And then I put the key in the door and I went, I've got five babies. I really
Yeah.
don't need a sixth baby. So that was the end of that thought. And I just decided that the organization that I belonged to at the time, you were only allowed to charge expenses up to £150 whilst you were a mentored doula. So they would decide whether or not they thought that you were capable of doulaing. And I thought, well, if I do four births, then I will cover my costs for the course. And if I don't like it, four births, I'm out. So I went to the first birth, and I remember the sun was shining, and I got a call, and I ran to Ronke's house. And when I got there, she's in the bath. Her husband was backwards and forward. He comes from a large family, so he was constantly on the phone updating everybody. And I said to him, mate, hush, take the phone away and just allow her to be in her space, allow her to be in her birthing brain. And we, I was studying Shakespeare at the time because I was doing a literature exam degree with the Open University. So I remember I was reading Hamlet, which is still one of my favorite plays, and pouring water over her back. And her husband sort of calmed and kept the conversations elsewhere. Then all of a sudden she said, I need to get out of this bath. So we got her out of the bath, dried her off, etc. Then she got dressed and then her waters broke and she burst into tears and she said, I was going to wear this to the hospital. And I said, don't worry. I said, there are other clothes. You're going to be fine. We managed to slowly get her to the car because her contractions have started really ramping up. We get in the car and they live on a road where they have two hopper buses. So it's the same hopper bus, but they both come down the road and in the same direction, then go off in a different direction. And he had pulled the car across so that she didn't have too far to walk, which meant he was double parked, which meant that the hopper buses couldn't go through. So you can see these sort of grumpy people in the bus, and then they suddenly see this heavily pregnant woman sort of waddling and stopping and contracting and waddling and stopping and contracting. So suddenly you've got all of these thumbs up, like, yeah, go for it. We get in the car. It's amazing what you remember about the first birth, the first official birth. Drive to the hospital, and as we get out of the car, she has this almighty contraction, and two women who are walking towards us take stock and look. One runs backwards back into the hospital, and one comes forward. And the one that comes forward said, we're midwives, it's our last shift, but let's get you in. And the second one comes back and throws a wheelchair at us. And I remember she saying, I can't sit on I can't, I can't. So she's on her knees on this wheelchair as we run through the door. And they quite literally, these two midwives, flung us into the labour ward and then said bye and left. So she's labouring away beautifully. And I remember I met one of my favourite obstetricians there, and Claire Mellon, and she was explaining to me, oh, if you look at this, you can see this on the body. This is how you can see labour's progressing. And she said to me, oh, you'd make a lovely doula. And I laughed because I'm like, I am a doula. And so my client is on the bed and she suddenly says, my fa, my front bottom is burning. And of course, what it was the baby was crowning and the head was coming. And she gave birth within, half an hour, 45 minutes of us being at the hospital. And
Wow.
it was incredible and it was beautiful and everyone was really happy and sort of sorted them into the postnatal ward and then I left. But when I left, I couldn't understand why cars were still moving and trucks and trains and planes. I'm like, do you all not know what has just happened? How are you all just doing your normal stuff when this is going on? And that was when I knew, yeah, I was going to be a doula. But it had never been in my plan. I remember being at school, talking to the careers officer about what I wanted to do. And I wanted to go to Oxford and read literature. But it's the 80s and I'm black. And she said, oh, no, no, no. Girls like you don't go to university, much less Oxford. Girls like you become nurses.
Oh,
And I wasn't the person then that I am now. And so I was quite crushed with that. Hence the literature degree with the Open University, because that woman really crushed me. But I remember thinking, I never want to work in a hospital with people. I don't want to be a nurse. It's not, never been on my radar to do. I always wanted to be a teacher. I could imagine myself a professor, all of these students in a room and just talking to them and fast forward through my journey, but we'll get there. And So I just couldn't quite get over how much this lit a flame in me. So when I first started as a doula, because I'm a mother of twins, I attracted lots of twin mums and I began to specialize in twin birth. And the vast majority of my clients had vaginal twin births when everyone thought that they would have to have cesareans, etc. And the one thing that I noticed within that organization that I'm no longer a part of was, where were the black people? Where were the brown people? I didn't, they all looked like white middle class women. Some said to me, we're not all white middle class. Some of us are working class. And I went, and yet you're still all white.
Mm.
Um, and whenever someone black came along to do a course, they would all point to me, say, look, there's a black doula. You should talk to Mars. So that was playing around in my head. And then was listening to Elsie Gale, who's an incredible woman, and I stand on her shoulders. And Elsie Gale, years before me, decades before me, called out racism in the maternity system and almost, they went after her. They almost destroyed this incredible woman. And I started to think, hold on, if I know that this is what helps you get a good birth, why aren't black and brown bodied people getting access to this? But of course, it all looked white and middle class. It was the purview of white middle class people. And so I started to do some research and discovered that black bodied women were twice as likely as white bodied women to die. This was when I first started. And everyone was talking
That's
about
pretty cool.
America.
But how long
Yeah.
ago, just for the listeners to get in
That's
perspective?
about
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Okay. So 20 years you've known about all these
Oh,
statistics.
yeah. And when I asked people about it, everyone pointed me to America, 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 where the work was being done or had started to be done for this. Sister Song, who started and coined the phrase reproductive justice, an incredible group of black-bodied women who were doing amazing work. But I kept saying, but it's happening here. But it was so hard to get statistics. It was so hard to get information. And because I'm sweet and quiet, Mars, goddess of. Are we allowed to swear on your podcast?
It's a
No.
safe space. You can say what you like.
Okay. Goddess of fucking war. That's me. And so I started talking out loud and saying, what's going on? And people said to me, everyone around me, well, birth is just birth. There's no difference between black and white. And I said, and yet black people aren't having the same good experiences. And then they said, well, you've got to be careful. You can't say things like that because you're going to upset people. I said, well, who am I going to upset? And they're like, well, we can't hear you, we being white-bodied people, because when you talk like that, it just puts us off. And that was when I said, you know what? I genuinely don't give a fuck about how uncomfortable you feel when black-bodied women and birthing people are dying. So, what do we do about this? And that's how my voice became the voice, the loud voice, because I refused to shrink myself to make other people feel better about it. And so I was looking into the stuff that was going on in America, looking at the stuff that was going on here in the UK. And eventually the Embrace report started to talk about the different ethnicities because no one was talking about the difference between ethnicities. But when they started to talk about it, they said, oh, well, that happens because they're black, because they have predispositions, diabetes, respiratory issues, cardiac issues. That happens because they're too poor, because we are, on the whole, at the bottom of the socioeconomic scale. Oh, that happens because they don't access the material, so we're too stupid. And but that they weren't saying those words, they're too black, they're too poor, they're too stupid, but all of their words said they're too black, they're too poor, they're too stupid. And I said, but that's not true. That can't be why. I mean, we are the global majority. So if our bodies are that poor at birthing, we would be the global minority. And also, when you believe it's because you're black that that happens, then you're buying into eugenics, the idea that white bodies do better. So I kept calling this out and talking about, meanwhile, working as a doula and trying to gather together the black doulas that I could find. And then about 10 years ago, 10 or so years ago, let me go back a couple of years before that. So I called out the organization, the doula organization that I was in, for their racism, where again, they told me that my tone was wrong. And I remember being on the leadership team of this organization, and a woman that I was on the leadership team and had been on the leadership team with for 5 years, because you try to change things from the inside.
Yeah.
She said, "Oh, I have never known about this." And I said, "But I've told you." And she said, "I'm leaving this conversation." And that was it. And that was how that whole organization behaved. We'll leave the conversation because it's not important, or it's not important to them. It changes nothing for them. So I stepped away from them. I kept calling out the racism within the organization, the lack of inclusion, and was accused of being too aggressive and too horrible to them. But, their loss, not mine.
Yeah.
And then I decided that it was time that I started training black and brown body doulas. And the woman who at the time was the head of education for that organization, so this was just around the time when I was deciding to leave, said to me, "Oh, we don't need any more doula training organizations." Of course, many have trained since me, right? So she said, there's no space for it. What she was basically saying was there's no space for black women to do this. And then I tried again with the new head of education, and they decided we're going to triple what it costs to become accredited with us.
Okay. Mm.
And I was like, do you know what? Why am I fighting to be accredited with an organization that is racist and other things? Why am I looking to bring black and brown bodied people into an unsafe space? And I thought, fuck it, I'll just do it myself. And my friend at the time, we were driving in Scotland, she said, just do the thing already. And so that's how Abuela Doulas was born.
I
And
love that.
Abuela is Spanish for grandmother. Because when I train doulas, I believe in bringing the wisdom of the grandmother into modern birth. Bring your culture, bring your tradition, bring all of you into this training, not this generic, this is how it works, this is what you do, but this is how you bring all of you. And I predominantly train black and brown bodied people. And because I set my stall out, this is for predominantly black and brown bodied people. I got the Q plus community, the trans community, the disabled community, the white women, everyone came because that's what inclusion means, right? When you raise black women, everyone wants to be in there. Everyone knows, okay, this is going to be a safe space for me. But I told them, like I tell people when I speak, a long introduction, isn't it? I tell them, like I tell everyone when I speak, I'm not here to center whiteness, white saviorism, white fragility, white tears, white discomfort, because black women are dying, black birthing people are dying, and that's my priority. And so Abuela Doulas was born. And through that, and through my gathering of information and my continual speaking up, demanding seats at tables, which I no longer get because I actually speak the truth. And no one wants someone who's going to challenge what they're doing. They just want someone who they can say, look, we have these people with us, and therefore we can't be that bad. And then when you go to parliamentary launches of reports and you read the report And you read things like in the recent birth trauma report, how the way we solve the Black maternal mortality crisis is to have more interpreters. And you're like, who let this racist shit fly? If I was at that table, that would not be in that report, or that would not be standalone in the report. That would be a small part of this. So that's what I do. I speak at conferences, I do workshops, I teach people. And oh look, the thing that I've always wanted to be, a teacher. I am her, I am she. I am talking to people, I'm teaching people. And so all of that, training these beautiful doulas, calling out systemic and structural racism, refusing to accept that we need to teach Black women to speak up when what we need is for the system to listen. And we don't need to just teach the individuals how to listen. We need to get into the system and the structure. We need to change the policy. We need to,
Hmm.
word that's been thrown around a lot, but less so at the moment, decolonize the
Yeah.
education system. All these people standing up and saying those things who are working beside white-bodied people who want to claim the credit for their work and want to dull it down so that it remains comfortable. That's not me. I am not that person. So, yeah, maybe that's why I don't get invited to have seats and tables anymore. But of course, then I had a really lovely the honor of being named Legacy Achievement in Black Maternal Health by the Motherhood Group, who just did the first Black Maternal Health Awards. And so it's quite lovely to finally get some flowers. But all that's done has encouraged me to want to do more. So I took some time out, sat back, made sure that, I didn't become one of those activists that Nova Reid talks about in her horrible histories on Audible. Not horrible histories, hidden histories. Oh my God, I have too many children. Horrible histories is
It's a
something
different
else
sort of
entirely. Hidden Histories by Nova Reid on
one.
Audible. She talks about how activists die young. She was talking about these different people and sharing how and where and why they died. And I thought, oh, I'm so glad I stepped back a couple of years ago to give myself time to breathe. I moved by the sea to give myself space to breathe. But now your goddess is back.
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited as well. I mean, you've done, I know it's taken this long for you to get your flowers, but you have made an impact with so many people and sparked so much. And so, I mean, including me. So, it is, it's not, it's a, what's the word? It's an unappreciative, it's like being a mother, isn't it? It's a thankless job.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't get thanks very often, and you often get be the difficult one. I mean, I've had to go self-employed because people don't. I'm an employee's worst nightmare. Put it that way. I'm an employee's
Hmm.
worst nightmare. They don't like me. They don't like me in their organization because I'm like you. I'll call them out, and I use their own policies and procedures against them. You know.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not one of those
yes.
people that just sits and moans. I'll back it up and I'll come with a solution as well. I don't believe in just
Yeah,
presenting a problem. I'll present a solution as
yeah.
well at the same time. But lots of people don't like that. Even in this
No, they
day,
don't.
can't I can't get my head around it. Like, so I've given up now. Like you say, trying to change things from the inside. I've given up doing that. Um,
Yeah,
so I've just started my own company, so I can set the rules.
yeah. And what I like about the Black maternal space now is my refusing to be quiet and be polite has made, because I believe that as Black-bodied women, we take up space and then we have the ability to create space. Some take up space and want to keep it for themselves and don't want to lose it. So, as I said in my speech at the awards, they get quiet, they get mute, they say nothing, and then crap gets through. But others will take up space and create space. And I believe that in my taking up of space, I've created space so that all of these grassroots organizations, whether they know of me and my work or not, have got space to move because I got the conversation started. But not only did I get the conversation started, but I talked about the need for action because we have a lot of trauma porn stories.
Hmm.
everyone wants to share their trauma porn story. And I get it because we do need spaces to be able to do that. But when all we hear are trauma porn stories, people get to clutch their pearls and cry and say, oh my God, that's awful. And nothing changes.
Mm.
And I've always demanded action. One of the reasons I started Abuela Doulas was because it's an action. It's something, it's training people to understand that the system that these people are going into is systemically and structurally racist. It was never designed for them. It's not broken, it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. So now I look at some of the doulas that I've trained. Um, there's one, she is a when she trained with me, oh gosh, so many of them said this. She said, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough to do this. Now she's just finished or finishing her PhD. She's a black feminist who moves in the black maternal space. There's another one, Amanda Smith. She was one of the nominees for an award. In fact, a couple of my doulas, one, two, yeah, two, at least two of my doulas were nominees for awards. They didn't win, dang it. Um, and Amanda has the maternity engagement action up in the Midlands in Birmingham, changing the face of Black maternal health up there. So watching these doulas who have set up the ones that work with and for an organization called Neighborhood Doulas, which provides doulas for refugees and vulnerable women and people at risk, you know, and thinking that's what action looks like. It spawns more action. But if we're busy sitting there saying, we must teach Black women to speak up, do they think we were willingly going to our death? Do they think we weren't calling out and saying, what's going on? This isn't right. We were continually silenced,
Mm.
accused of refusing service and care, accused of bullying and aggression. Black fathers being told to sit down and be quiet or security would be called when all we were doing were advocating for ourselves, you
Yeah.
know. And I'm not here for the white saviors that I'll come and advocate for you. No. How
Mm.
do you amplify my voice? How do you call out racism when you see it? How do you stop being that lovely non-racist swimming in an ocean of racism?
Mm.
How do you get up and say, no, this isn't right? Oh God, I could go on all day.
I love it.
This is what inspires me. This is what keeps me going, ensuring that people are seen and held and are safe. And having a doula doesn't mean that you're going to have a perfect birth, but it does, in my opinion, mean you'll have a good birth. And a good birth is one where you're listened to. You make choices, even if the result, the end, the birth isn't the way you expected it to be, but that you're heard and you're seen and you make the choices that you want to make, knowing at the end of it that you've done all that you can do to help you and your baby. And that includes the babies who are stillborn. And as my friend who I supported says, they're stillborn and still born.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is actually a huge gift, especially, if you experience baby loss, then to know that you've done everything that you could have done to protect
Mm,
you and your baby, that, living with how many women live with regret and guilt and blame themselves,
mm,
and that just adds more trauma to the grief. Whereas if you can tell yourself hand on heart that I know I did everything that I could have done to try and save my baby, it just makes it
yeah,
a little bit easier.
yeah. And of course, for those parents who there is or seems to be no reason why this baby has died, or they've gotten towards the end of their pregnancy and suddenly their baby is no longer living. I I supported a couple in a stillbirth, and that birth really affected the way that I was as a doula and how I train doulas. because we always used to say things like, oh, everything's going to be great. You're going to do so well. You're going to have such a fabulous, etc. And I wasn't supposed to be their doula. They were friends of mine. They lived right at the arse end of London. I was up in northeast London. They were down in southeast London. The Elizabeth line now makes it easier to get everywhere, but those days you could not. And I was going to encapsulate their placenta for them. So they'd had their first baby. And with the second baby, they wanted to encapsulate. Her first baby was born at home, and her first baby was a 43 weeker. So hospitals get really freaked out
Yeah.
once you passed 40 weeks, as though that man's decision that that day is the day babies come. And so when she called me, she was about 41 weeks in a few days. And she called me and said, oh, my waters have gone. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you're available. And I went, this baby's early because her first was 43 weeks and she wanted all of her babies born at home. But when her waters went, this baby died. And I got a text from her saying, just pop into the hospital, baby's being a pickle, midwife can't find the heartbeat. And then when my phone rang half an hour later, I knew what David was going to say. And I shared their names because their story is in the public domain. And I knew what David was going to say, whilst my brain was saying, no, don't say the words. And he said, the baby's dead. And I said, I'm coming. He said, no, 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 no. It's so far for you to come. I said, I'm coming. Today, you need me there because I know what I do as a doula and I kn knew how they needed to be held in their space. So we arrive at the hospital and they're just wandering around the car park, just lost. As just and so I took them home and I made them eat food because I knew, she said, they've given me the choice. I can wait at home, I can give birth at home, I can wait and give birth at hospital, I can be induced. And she said, is it wrong that I want to protect my body for the next babies? Because she knows how hospital birth can be. And I said, yeah, it's fine. So they ate and she decided that she'd be induced, but she would do it at hospital because for her, home was life. And
Hmm.
she didn't want to birth her dead baby at home. And this was her thought and her decision. And as a doula, I'm not there to make the decision for you. So we go to the hospital, and I remember a friend of ours came and he brought food, and we laughed at the time. So here she is, here they are, their baby has died. And he brought it, what did he bring us? He brought us Chinese food, fried chicken, and something else, but no cutlery, nothing to eat it with. And so we laughed, but he just knew that they needed to eat through the process because I'd told him. Anyway, the midwife kept patting me, saying, I'm here for you. And I said, no, no, I have someone to fall on because I'd made sure to call my really good friend Maisie, who was also a doula at the time. So she kept her phone on for me in case I needed it. And we talked about the baby's womb life. We talked about the life that they thought they would have for their baby. I sent them into to the corner to lie down and sleep because I knew that this labour would probably be hard because how do you labour knowing that you're not going to be holding a live baby at the end? And then throughout the labour, so the hospital had put a little butterfly on the door so that people knew that they couldn't just walk into this room and that there was a loss in this room. And the midwife said, yep, they could have a birth pool, and we had the lights down. And I remember at one point thinking, Of course, you're not disturbing this birth. You don't need to disturb this birth by constantly checking the mother, etc., because the baby's already dead. So you're just waiting. We, they laughed, they cried. At one point, Siobhan is in the pool and she's surging beautifully. And she suddenly looks up and says, "This would be the perfect birth if it wasn't for the dead fucking baby." And we all burst out laughing and immediately burst into tears as well. And I tell the doulas that I train, I tell people when you're supporting someone through loss, don't have an expectation of how they will be or how you think they should be. This birth was a celebration and a grief and a
Mm,
grieving and a tragedy. So, um, sometimes I held on to dad because he was crying. Sometimes I held on to her. Sometimes I held on to them both. Sometimes I stepped back and mostly left them in their space. And when the baby was born, I remember the head came out. And in fact, just before that, the mum said, "If this baby's a girl, can we call her Grace? Because I want her born in grace and dignity," which is what we gave her. Space to give birth in grace and dignity. Sometimes that meant taking the midwife aside to just chat with her over here so that she would just leave them, let them do. So I remember the baby's head came, and what happens is the head comes out, then the body turns so that the shoulders can come out. And this face, this beautiful face looked up. And in my head and in my heart, I'm going, okay, prove everyone to be a liar. This is your moment, baby. This is where you open your eyes and we all realize this has been a horrible mistake. But it doesn't happen. The baby's born and she's a girl and they hold their daughter and they cry. But the placenta doesn't come for ages. My theory, not scientific theory, but my theory, birthing the placenta means the pregnancy's over,
mm,
means the baby's born, means the baby's dead, no longer part of her mother. Eventually, the the placenta comes out. Takes a really long time. And after the placenta comes out, that is the time when Siobhan gave this really primeval scream. And it's like, yeah, the
mm.
baby's dead. And
Yeah.
David sang a lullaby to his daughter. He held her and he sang. I took photos like it was going out of fashion. And I remember they said to me, "We don't want to see any photos." And I said, "I've got these photos. I've emailed them to you. When you want them, if you want them, open them. If you don't, don't." 8 months later, they opened the photos because the only person who doesn't see their baby being born unless there's a huge mirror is the person birthing the baby. And there were some beautiful shots in there. I took photos of them. They got a photographer friend in who took photos of the baby. They were really held in the space. The the hospital made some mistakes in the way they cared for them, the draining of the birth pool, the just the way they spoke afterwards in the following months, etc. So David and Siobhan have done a lot of work and had hospital policies changed because of things that happened. So now we fast forward and they're having another baby because they always wanted three. And this baby is born at home. And this baby, like the first baby, what do you mean 40 weeks? What do you mean 41 weeks? What do you mean 42 weeks? This baby is pushing it. And from 37 weeks, the hospital kept saying, maybe we should induce you so it doesn't happen again to be sure that this baby's safe. But of course, that baby died because of a really rare anomaly. When the waters went, the membrane shredded and wrapped around the umbilical cord. And therefore, the baby didn't get any oxygen. She said to me, "What do I do?" And I said, well, being induced, would that have prevented what happened with Grace? And she said, no. And I said, so what do you want to do? And so she waited. And in fact, when the baby was born, the midwife said, oh, this baby doesn't look overdue. They said that about her first as well, because she's a 43 weeker when she carries her babies. But the mistake that the hospital made was you get two midwives at a home birth, and both midwives brought students. So she had four people in her home. And she said to me afterwards, I really wanted you to be there with me, but there were so many people in my home. I just couldn't have anyone else. And then she said, and now I regret it because I wish you'd been there.
Mm.
Fast forward a few more years, and they have a fourth baby. And she's like, no, you're coming to this birth. So I go to that birth, and in a closing of the circle, the midwife that I met at the stillbirth was there. And Siobhan sang this baby out. She's an opera singer by trade, and she sang this baby out, and it was an incredible birth. So four daughters, and they still remember Grace's birthday. They still involve their daughters or bring Grace into their daughter's celebrations. They all know about the sister
Mm.
that
Nice.
came and didn't stay. And as a doula, what it did for me was remind me that we don't know how things will turn out, but we do know that we can make choices. We do know that we can speak up. We can say yes. We can say no. And Grace's birth does remain one of the most beautiful births that I've ever attended, and I've attended hundreds upon hundreds of births.
Honestly,
So,
that I'm like, I need a bit of a tissue, I think, listening to that because it sounds so beautiful. Um,
mm,
in such a horrible situation, there's so much beauty in it.
yeah. And I think people find that unusual. They're like,
Mm.
well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, because we can sell it. She had a womb life, her
Yeah.
kicking at certain things, moving because of different foods, getting a bit miffed because she didn't like that food that her mother ate, you know. And when they had her funeral, they talked about her womb life and they talked about the dreams that they had for her. And for a couple of years, they would call me from time to time and we would just meet up to talk about Grace, talk about her birth, you know. And I think that was when it really came home to me. Because I used to say it to people all the time, once I'm your doula, I'm always your doula. But yeah, what a privilege to be someone's doula and be forever in their life, even if they never see you.
Yeah, yeah, that is really beautiful. And like I say, it's just because there's losing a baby and there's grief, but there's trauma as well. And we don't need
Yeah,
to add more trauma, and our experiences is what adds the
yeah,
trauma. So if you
yeah,
can take that away from somebody, that's a huge gift. It really is.
yeah.
Like, well done you. That's honestly, that really touched me, that did.
So before people think that I was like this super strong woman, I remember I came out of that birth and I phoned my friend Maisie. Maisie had done a birth the night before, and when I messaged her, she was about to turn her phone off. So she left her phone on for me, and I phoned her, and I think for 45 minutes, all I could say is, the baby is dead. I was just so broken. But I knew that it wasn't my space or place to break in the birthing room. Don't get me wrong, I cried with them, but this was about their grief, not mine. And then I came out and I remember Macy said, how are you getting home? And I went, oh, well, the buses and trains have started running again. She said, you're going to get in a fucking cab and you're going to get in one hour. And that was what I needed, someone to just bring me back to that space where I got myself home. and basically put my head under my pillow and howled for a few days, only emerging when Siobhan or David called, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. You
But
come strong for them, don't you?
yeah, yeah. And but I built my support network. I have my support network. And I think when you're supporting someone through something like this, you need your support network because you can't be crying on top of the people who've had this loss. Cry with them, but not on top of them. You need somewhere else to go to say, this is so fucking unfair.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. Um, wow. That yeah, that really did touch me. So, but all I'm thinking as well, because you kept saying at the beginning that you was quiet and meek, and so how did you get from the young Mars to the Mars that you are now? Because you're definitely not quiet and weak and timid now.
Because I woke up one day and thought, but I want my fucking degree. And that was the start of me saying, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. And I got my degree whilst my babies were tiny. You know, I remember graduating and thinking, I did it. I did it despite the voices around me telling me that I couldn't, you know, and it just really made me go, I have a voice that needs to be heard. And I'm no longer going to be silenced by white-bodied people who are afraid of my power. And that's how I became the someone that I am. And being in different hospitals and home birth settings where midwives and or doctors were not listening to my clients, whatever my clients' hue, I'm like, no,
Mm.
not on my watch. Sometimes it's that really, you know, you catch bees with honey,
Yeah. Yeah,
just
yeah,
being
yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really sweet. And you don't want over sweet me because you know that you're fucking up somewhere along the line if I've gone super sweet. And I was talking to my astrologer the other day, and she said, you hold a grudge. And I went, yeah. I said, I do. My levels of petty hit the floor and then found the trap door, you know. And she said, yes, she said, you have a way of, she said, you're passively aggressive, not petty passive aggressive, but passively. So you will just say, oh, and then people change. And sometimes I would say to people, is that really what you want to be doing? Is can you explain why? Or, oh, just in case you've not read their birth plan, these are the things that they want, and they haven't consented to those things. Oh, can I get you a drink? Are you all right? Oh, hold on, you need to stop. They've asked you to stop. So it just depends on where I am.
Yeah.
So being in the birth field has definitely also activated my Mars goddess of war.
And do you think because maybe you're doing it for other people as well, it gives you, because I know for me, I mean I like to speak up anyway. I've always been that way.
Mm,
Um, but when I'm doing it for other people, I'm even more passionate and I'm even more louder.
yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons I was able to be such a loud voice in the maternity space, not in my doulaing per se, but in the birth activism, is because I had nothing to lose. I wasn't going, they could bar me and ban me from hospitals, which they never did, because I had the reputation of being a sensible doula. Imagine that, sensible. Yes, you get older, you're like, I don't want to be called sensible. Um, a friend of mine, we got together, I met her at the OU, we get together once a year, three of us. And she said that we met on an online forum, and she said, I thought that you would be an older white head with a bob dressed in tweed librarian. She said, because when you would say things, it was this real air of don't fuck with me, but so polite. And I went, bit of a shock when you met me, wasn't it? But knowing that people were dying, I just couldn't sit with that. And I couldn't let somebody else say, oh, well, that's awful, but the way you're treating me, it's like, I'm not treating you in any way. I'm calling out what's going on and you feel a ways about it. You're defensive and you don't like it. And frankly, I don't care. I remember speaking at a breastfeeding organization's conference or study day. And I told them all, I'm not here for fragility, tears, discomfort, etc. And within 2 minutes of me just sharing the stats, a woman at the front started to cry. So what I did was I paused and I said, right, let's just breathe together. And I took her through some breathing. And when we got to the end of the breathing, I said, are you okay? She said, yes. I said, great. Now look around this room. Those people are no longer concerned with the black women that are dying because they're upset for you and your discomfort. If I, in my black skin, can live my life in discomfort, you can spend 45 minutes in my talk sitting in yours.
Well
I
done.
know.
I'd love to have been there to see that.
Well, everyone else then had their eyes really wide open,
I bet
barely
everybody was like,
blinking.
"Oh my God, don't see my tears."
But I think as well, having my children and having to fight for my children, my third baby, for example, she was born at the end of August. I had to fight for her every day in school because she was a year younger than most of her class and she was expected to act a year older than she was. I remember she was 3 and then she just turned 4 and then a few days later she started school. Meanwhile, the first girl in that class turned 6. Sorry, turned 5
Yeah,
immediately. So I always think of Snow White when all the animals go up to see Snow White, and this tortoise is really doing its best to get there. And all of this stuff happens. Snow White wakes up, and all the animals come rushing out just as the tortoise gets to the top of the stairs. And that's how I think of my third daughter. Just as she got to the top of the stairs, I'm 5. Everyone was like, I'm 6,
yeah,
and came flooding in. And I had to fight for her every day. Why is she crying? Because really, if she'd been born a couple of days later, she'd have been in nursery
yeah,
where you allow them to cry.
yeah,
She keeps falling asleep because if she'd been born a couple of days earlier, she'd have been in nursery and you'd have sat them all down to have a sleep in the day. Went through senior school. She was born at the end of August. This is why she seems young to you, because she is
yeah.
young. And I think when you're fighting for your children, my oldest son, he very clever child. Taught himself to read when he was 3 and his times tables at 4.
Oh,
You could literally see the cogs in his brain turning as he went, oh yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, right. And then he knew something. He pointed out a cloud to me, said, Mum, that cloud looks like Papua New Guinea. I'm like, how do you even know Papua New Guinea? Because his favorite reading was an atlas and he learnt the shapes of the countries, you know and fighting for him so that he got the education he deserved. And the teacher like, well, that's just 1 in 30. So we need to teach to the others. And I'm like, I get that, but what can you give him? And
yeah.
I think when you're fighting for your children, suddenly you're like, I need to set these children an example.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
I need to be able to fight for them. And the other 3 children, fighting for them in different ways to ensure that they got the things that they wanted and they needed. And I think, well, I've got to be an example. I better start fighting for myself too. And I think that's probably why I woke up one day and went, you know what, I want my degree. And I went and I got it.
oh, well done. Oh, no, and I hear that. It resonates so much with me because, I mean, in my family, it's a running joke because they always take the mick out of me because they're like, I'm the queen of complaints or I've always got something to say. Like my husband will tell my daughter, don't tell your mum because you know what she's like. She'll go down the school. Like, and I do. I mean,
Yeah,
my daughter's primary school. I had a meeting with the head teacher. I made her sit down with me and change her whole curriculum because I was like, it's
good.
not diverse at all in the slightest. Like, and that's a
Mm,
requirement. So let's work together. I can introduce you to somebody who can help you change that. So, and
yeah.
luckily, the head teacher, she was actually quite good. She would sit down and she acknowledged it. She talked with me. She worked with me. But that's the sort of stuff I do. And I just feel like There's not enough of us doing things like that. Like out of all the children that go to that school, where I live is very diverse. So why has nobody else done that before me, you know?
Because people tell us, hush, you're making me uncomfortable. There has to be a different way to do this. Oh, just be gentler. You've got to do this slowly. And of course, look at us. We big women. We were grown to keep our heads down because we knew that if you spoke up, you got in trouble. In fact, you only had to walk through the classroom door to be in trouble because of, the color of your skin. You knew that you just had to obey authority to keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
And that's what people do. And then people like you and me get to the point where we're like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not playing that game. And we're taught to just keep ourselves quiet and still. But some people are like, no. But we're not being angry with no purpose. You talked about how people come and how they turn their pain into purpose. And anger is a form of pain.
Mm.
And my anger at the statistics for the deaths and the near deaths of black-bodied people spurs me in this work. And some people just think, oh, well, Mars is being angry. I'm going to be angry. But there's no purpose to their anger.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there has to be a purpose with it. And anger doesn't mean that you're shouting and swearing. There's a place for shouting and swearing. Anger can sometimes mean being incredibly quiet with it. People, I said at the speech, didn't I? You only want to hear me call your name when I'm telling you how amazing and how wonderful you are, because I will call your name and say why I'm calling your name and what it is that's going on. So I don't know. I think I was probably born with it. I think
Mm.
I had it stamped on when I sat in that careers officer's room. And I think it reactivated in me when I had my children. And this work, this work in the Black maternal health space, it's not going to be done in my lifetime. We
Mm.
hear how the figures are changing and improving, but I keep reading the studies that say we're seeing ethnicities recorded wrongly. Do you know if you refuse to give your ethnicity or if they're not sure of your ethnicity, you will be marked as white in
What?
the boxes? And the statistics that we get are only as good as the data that we get from the different hospital trusts.
Mm.
So when I see people saying, yay, it's working, and then I hear black women, because people are always dropping into my inbox and my DMs saying, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, being told, oh, you're having a cesarean, we're going to sterilize you whilst we're in there. No conversation.
What?
Black women being told they'll be strapped to the bed and this is what will happen to them. Being with my daughter, as my daughter's told at her booking in visit at the hospital, these are the things that we will do. These are the things that will happen. And I said, all of this is choice, right? Oh, yes. I said, you haven't presented it as choice. You've
Yeah.
told her these are the things you're going to do. So people say things are improving and changing, but the stories keep coming. They keep
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah. And
And
it
that's
is.
why we can't be,
There goes.
sorry. I was
No,
just going to
it's
say
true.
that's why we can't be quiet. We have to keep moving.
It's true because, like you said, they are coming down slightly. But like I said, we don't even know if it is true, a true representation of what is really happening. Because I mean, I've only just started filling out the that part of the questionnaires and things, giving putting down my ethnicity more recently for that purpose, to be able to for them to be able to record the statistics accurately. But for years, I didn't do that. I used to think, why is
No.
that relevant? Why do I need to do that? You know, so I'm
Yeah.
sure there's lots of other people that feel the same as well.
Yeah. That was me.
Yeah, so it is, and and they are still reluctant to take responsibility. So I've been in. So I'm an example is I've been in a complaint for the last 4 years for both of my sons, for my son that passed, and then my son that I had after him, the treatment that I received, and I just last week got a email, an outcome letter from the ombudsman. So it was 2 years with the hospital and then two
Hmm.
years with the ombudsman. That alone is a battle. Like
Mm.
who has the strength to do that? Like I have I've studied criminology and law. So then that's looking at things, doing things like that is my passion. I've always supported other people and advocated for other people. So I feel like I've got a bit more skills to do that. So it's a bit easier for me, for example. But it was so hard for me to
Yeah.
get the strength after losing my son and then have another baby to then be able to then put all that detail and that trauma down into paper
Mm.
and follow through. I mean, the amount of meetings that we've had, the amount of times I've had to go back and forth because they would acknowledge some of the complaint, but then miss out other parts of it and expect me to just be okay with that. So, but no, I'll go
Mm.
back. Okay, yeah, you've answered this, but what about this, this, and this? And now because you
Mm.
said this, it's now presented this and this and this for me and made me think of this and this. And for, I say, 4 years, for them to come back and tell me that they're not upholding my complaint, that their trust acted in accordance with their, so actually, this is only one part of the complaint from my rainbow baby. But as far as they're concerned, the trust acted in accordance with their guidelines and policies and procedures. So I haven't read the details yet because I need to give myself space to do that because I know how it's going to be,
Yes.
but I just read the first 2 pages. But on the first 2 pages, they start with saying that because they're so inundated with claims and they're backed up, so the backlog, they don't have time. They can only focus on the serious things. So my emotional well-being and impact
Wow.
on me is not going to be taken into consideration. And they took two
Wow.
years to tell me that as well. At no point in that 2 years did they once say, just so you're aware, we're not actually going to take this part of your complaint into consideration. So you don't have to do any work on it, for example, and put so much detail into your complaint.
Yeah.
But that, and I'm thinking, how how stupid is that? I mean, we all
Mm.
know how much stress and how much our emotions, mental well-being affects us emotionally as well as physically. It impacts
Mm.
so many different things. But for you to take that out, of course, you
Yeah.
minimize everything. And also, the way they do it is they look at things as individuals. So each fuck up, basically, as an individual thing. But how about let's put it all together? And if one person experienced like 30 odd fuck ups, let's put that together and see how that has impacted that one person.
Yeah.
Look at it as each individual thing on its own. So if we do that, then
Yeah.
of course we're minimizing everything, but we're not looking at the bigger picture and how impact. And so, how are we going to affect change if we're not even
Yeah.
looking at that? And this is because my son didn't die. My rainbow baby, I believe that they've said it's not serious enough and they've acted in trust, but he didn't die because I advocated for him. The first time I let you make the decisions, I let you lead me. I will never do that again. And then I
Mm.
made sure that I'd done my own research, that I knew what I was talking about and the things that they needed to do. So I advocate for myself. My son is still here to this day because of it. But I had the same journey. I went into early labor with him. The difference is that I was being monitored. I'd asked for those extra monitors, those extra scans, and then I'd got the stitch. And even with that, I still had to, what they would class as get aggressive, but speak up to say, like, why have you got
Yeah.
waiting here? Like, get me to a hospital that can help me and they can help my baby. And if you don't,
Mm.
you're all gonna feel it, basically.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and then that suddenly there's the action. Things start happening.
Yeah.
But they can see that, I'm not somebody's going to back down. I can also use my words and I can use fancy words too, just like them. So, and I
Yeah.
can speak just like them. And I can be a
Mm.
bit like you, I can be very cutting, but I'm still very calm and polite with a smile on
Yeah.
my face.
Yeah.
But that
Yes.
takes a lot of strength to do that in the moment as well, when you're
It
petrified
does.
of what's going to happen. But it is so I say it's broken. It's not like you said. It's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I applaud you for your
yeah,
fight. I'm sorry that you have had to fight. I'm sorry that black-bodied people have to suffer so much just to get seen or heard or attention or treatment. And that's the anger that fires me to keep working, to keep moving, to watch people start these grassroots works and start to really move and start to change things because I do believe we're changing the face of birth. I wish it were quicker, but
Mm-mm.
change often comes slowly.
Yeah.
But I think we are the revolution in birth, in maternity, in the perinatal, in loss, in fertility, in the postpartum, in all of it. And it's just fucked up in this world that you have to be in pain before the world will change anything.
Yeah, yeah. And it's done in such a way that unless we have these conversations, we're not even aware of it half the time. And
Mm,
sometimes it can be so subtle that you don't think that you've had this treatment because of the way you look. It's only when you talk to other people and learn about their experiences and see how different they were to yours, then you realize, like, I didn't realize the how bad it was until I
mm,
lost my son, and I found people like you, and I started looking into things myself. I remember one year I decided to take it upon myself to research everything. I'm one of them people, I like to know for facts for myself,
mm, mm.
not just listen to what people are telling me. And in every, I mean, I knew this anyway, but I had the physical statistics in front of me to prove it. But in every aspect of life, people of color are at a disadvantage,
Yeah,
every single aspect of life. And as you know, from the womb, you're at how, I mean, how is that even possible? But you're at a disadvantage from the womb. So I
yeah,
mean, how is that? You were having to fight from when we were in our mum's tummies, you know. So
yeah,
it's awful, but it is. You're right. Things are changing. Even in the time that from me losing my son, it'll be 5 years this month. And the amount of people I've seen emerging talking about baby loss and within the Black community as well, and
mm, mm.
supporting each other. There's so much support, more support out there now, but we've had to do it ourselves. That's, I mean, it's empowering, but it's frustrating at the same time because
Mm.
we're having to, there's not a space for us, so we have to create our own space.
Yeah. And I think it takes me back to my belief we need to take up space and create space
Hmm.
so that this work keeps going. And we need to, you talked about, that we need to talk about these things. And that's something that within our community, until recently, we've not been good at. And I know why it happens because it goes back to safety. It wasn't safe to speak. And so through the generations, we've taught people not to speak. But the thing that used to keep us safe is the thing that is now killing us. We need to talk. We need to talk to our families, to our children about birth, about death, about life. We need to talk, not, oh, they're too young to know about that. I was in a room full of people who all but one had given birth. And I was talking about placenta for a reason. And two of the women said to me, no, you can't talk about that. Can't talk about that. They're all young. They shouldn't know about that. And because I'm shy, quiet, and retiring, I said, they've all had penises inside them and they've all become pregnant and grown and birthed babies with all the gubbins and all the fluids and all the mucus. I said, why should they not hear about that amazing, incredible temporary organ that our body grows to sustain the babies inside of us? I
It's
don't get it.
It's true. I often say to my daughter, she cringes, but I'm so vocal with things. But she'll say if I have a sip of her drink or something, how these kids can be like, "Oh, mom, why are you doing that?" I'm like, "Listen, Mia, you came out of my vagina."
Yeah, you
So
came out of me, baby.
yeah, yeah. She's like, "Oh, why do you say that?" I said, "Because it's true. That's what happens."
Yeah, and my when my second grandbaby was born, so I was there for the birth of both my grandbabies. The first one was born in my living room, the second one was born in her same daughter. And I was there, and he wanted to be awake when the baby was born and cut the cord because my daughter talked to him. Honestly, all of my children know so much about birth, etc., that it's just not a thing for them. They talk freely. They could have talked to any of my clients on the phone and worked out what the issue was and helped them through it. And in fact, my eldest son, see, look at me doing three stories at once. He was about 13 and he's in school and an all boys school. And his teacher talks about this is how birth works. And he said, I'm sorry, sir, but birth doesn't work like that. He said, right, Lord, if you know how birth works, why don't you stand up and tell the class? He said to me, Mum, I got all the way through birth, the placenta, the golden hour, and I was halfway through breastfeeding when I thought I should stop. Right? So anyway, so my grandbaby, second grandbaby is being born, and we wake Rafi up and bring Raphael downstairs, you know, and he's rubbing his mum's back and he's holding her hand and he's telling her, it's all right, mummy. I mean, he did tell her before she went into labor that if she ate salt, the baby would spin and come out. And we're like, okay, okay. So the baby is born, but at the point, so when babies come, it's slow, then it's a sudden movement as they shoot out the back. And he ran from the room, and I ran and I grabbed him and I said, your brother is born. That's all that happened, and brought him back into the room because I didn't want him going away with the memory of this shocking thing.
Yeah,
So let me break this down for you, baby. And then he was fine. He was back in the room, and then he cut the cord, you know,
amazing.
and but they're so close. But he loved it. He was so excited. Of course, he went to school. The baby's born in the early hours of Sunday morning. He went to Legoland with his auntie, my youngest daughter, and her friend. And then he went to school, and I said to the teacher when I dropped him off, I said, I'll let him tell you that he's had his baby. And she said to me when I picked him up, she said, I waited as long as I could, and he said nothing. So I asked him, did you do anything exciting this weekend? And he said, yes, I went to Pizza Express. So it just became a normal part of his life. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be talking to each other about the
Mm,
normal things in life. And birth and death are normal things in life. And that's how we support each other by talking and using our voices to keep us safe
mm.
and to keep safe the people around us.
Yeah, definitely. I try to be very open with my kids,
Mm.
especially after their brother are losing their brother. So I want them. I mean, I was six when my dad died, so I grew up with grief, So it's never
Yeah,
been, and my mum's always she never sheltered us from it, and actually I don't think
yeah,
it's a bad thing. Like this is why I think I can do these podcasts and things like this because I'm comfortable around grief. If anyone can
yeah.
but I've been around it so much from such a young age that
Mm,
even in with my friends with my community, people look to me when someone dies. They tend to look to me because I'm the first one round with food and drink or whatever, and I just look after them. Like, there's nothing you can do. We just need to look after them,
mm.
just support
Yeah,
them, It's their
yeah.
journey. We just got to hold them as much as we can along this journey. But it's a lot of
Mm.
people tend to shy away from these conversations. So I do like to have them. How's that? I'm on listening as well. So how did you get from being a doula then to a life coach?
It's the same job. It's
Well,
walking alongside people. It's mirroring themselves back to them. It's not about molding them and shaping them into being something. It's about mirroring the things that they're saying, listening to them, truly listening to them. So, is it Kevin Hart or one of those comedians? There's this meme, and he says, we're not going to, and it's the middle of one of his comedy sketches, and he says, we're not going to skip past that like you didn't just say it. And often in life coaching, people will start to say something and then hide it with a lot of other words. And I'm like, hold on. And then I mirror that back to them and say, what is it that you want? Because this is what you say. This is what you say you believe. This is what you show you believe. So, how do we get you to the place where you are what you believe? Or that you are the opposite of what you believe. It's the same journey, just walking along. I love people. I love black women. I mean, what can I tell you? So, my friend Maisie, we were doulas together. And then Maisie moved into women's health, menstrual health. And then Maisie became a life coach. And Maisie and I have been friends for like the 20 odd years. And she just said to me one day, I think it's time you owned who you are. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're a life coach. And I went, no, I'm not a life coach. Because I'd seen life coaches that are like, pay me lots of money and I'll help you make lots of money. And I was like, ah, Emperor's New Clothes stuff. And Maisie said, but that's not what life coaching is. She said, and you're a life coach. She said, look at the way you've coached your clients, your doula students, the people around you. And I had thought about 10 years previously that I'd quite like to do life coaching. And I thought, no, because then I saw some bad examples of life coaching and thought, no, I don't want to be that person. And eventually, she always forgets, but Maisie and I, we have conversations at pivotal points of each other's lives that change the course of what the other was doing. And she just said, no, I think it's time you owned it. I think you just become a life coach. So I did. And she's right. But when I realized that life coaching and doulaing was the exact same thing, in the life coaching, unless they're a pregnant client, there doesn't tend to be a baby at the end of it, but there is a birth at the end of it. And there's a birth in that person. So I'm a no bullshit coach. I like to help people find that quiet voice that they're trying not to listen to, the one that others are stamping down on, so that they speak with their true voice, so that they take up space and create space. I know, I just love it.
I do. I mean, I'm actually technically trained as a life coach. When I used to work for the YMCA, I used to work with young people living in hostels, and even just I remember doing the training, and I absolutely loved it because the way it made me think
Yeah,
and question stuff, or not to question stuff. For example, like this, the art of true listening.
yeah,
Without us trying to associate our own things with what other people are saying.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
And I always remember there was a like a quote story they said about um a caterpillar. There was a man living in a cave, and they had a caterpillar in the cave that went into its cocoon, and he watched this caterpillar in its cocoon, and it grew this bond and sense of like responsibility for this caterpillar. And as it was turning into a butterfly, it was watching it trying to break free and felt sorry for the butterfly, and so helped the butterfly break free. But by doing that, it disabled the butterfly. His wings were never strong enough for the
mm,
butterfly to be able to fly. And then the
mm,
model was that the butterfly needed to break free themselves to strengthen their wings enough to be able to fly away. And I always remember
yeah.
that always stuck with me.
Do you want to know what I remember about caterpillars and butterflies that's applicable? I always used to think that the caterpillar in its cocoon grew its wings and grew its antenna, etc. But no, it goes to complete mush.
Yes. Yeah.
It goes to complete mush and then it reforms. And that to me is life coaching. Some of these thoughts and beliefs that you have, they need to go to mush so that you can grow. Some of the things that we're going to do are uncomfortable, but discomfort is because you're growing. I just love it. I love it. Oh my God, you've got me on my second passion now. How many hours have we got for this podcast?
Because you've done so much as well, though. You've got so much to talk about. But
I
and it
love
honestly,
people.
oh, and it shows. It shows. Like you can see that you're genuine and you have integrity. And that for me is like that's something I really live by, having integrity. Like I have had to stand alone so many times
Mm,
because I've maintained my integrity. But I
mm,
there. I will not I'm so, especially now as I'm getting older, I'm so proud. I can look back and see certain times in life where, especially when you look at certain friends and things and how they've responded to situations to how you've responded. And I just think if I was to go tomorrow, I would be happy with myself and how I've lived my life because I've always
mm,
had integrity. But I find that, I mean, I've always worked in support. I've worked, supported housing. I've always worked in management, so in the corporate world, and it's so few and far between.
mm,
Do you
mm,
actually come across people who've genuinely got integrity, especially when the industry that I've worked in, where it's meant to be a caring industry, you're meant to care for other people, support other people.
mm.
But so many people are just about the money and how they can benefit themselves. Like it's
It happens in the black maternal health space. The people that want the money, the people that want the seat and the table, want their name in the books. The people who will take money from the white organizations that harm black people. I'm not here for that. That's the poison chalice.
yeah.
And I'm not here for that. And there have been times when people have come together and said, we should all come together to do this. But because I won't accept money from those people, because I won't accept the performative gesture, people say, well, how can we make this work? And I think we forget how much power we have
Mm.
ourselves, how we can do this ourselves, and how we don't need to poison ourselves to make things happen. And so, yeah, that's what I do. But I love people until I don't. But, that's the Scorpio rising in me. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I'm a Scorpio too, by the way.
I'm Taurus, Scorpio rising, Scorpio, Scorpio.
Yeah, yeah. I love a
That's
Scorpio.
probably why we get on.
Yeah, we're lovely, loyal people, but you just don't want to cross us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, honestly, though, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you. I could literally sit here all day and talk to you and listen to your stories, and I'm sure most people could as well. But I thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for agreeing to come on here today. And also, if you just want to let people know if they how they can follow you and how they can find out about your the amazing work you do, and if they want to um be life coached by you or anything like that, how do they do that?
Yeah. Okay. So if you're looking for a life coach, you can find me on the socials at underscore Mars, like the planet Lord. Or you can find my website, which is www dot very originally named now, marslord.co.uk. If you want to know more about my activism, if you want to be trained as a doula, then you would find me on the socials at abuela, which is Abuela, doula, Doula, all one word, or abueladoulas.co.uk. That's how oh, frankly, just Google my name. I'll just keep popping up.
Yeah, 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 you do. Okay, and also I'll try and put all the connections as well in the podcast when I release it as well. So if anybody does want to get to, if they haven't already, I'm sure but most people will be following you already. But if they're not, then they need to start.
Thank you.
They'll learn a few things.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
been a joy talking to you today. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on.